Welcome back. All my endgame practice has been paying off, I think, because I did pretty well in the endgame. That the result of this game here, although there were quite a few pitfalls along the way. Let's take a look, and hopefully, either you or me will learn something. Okay, I opened with d4, as I almost always do with the white pieces. My opponent played c6, which I think looks like the beginnings of the Carol Khan, but would have worked better against e4, which is possible for me to play here, but I went ahead with my attempting to play the London system, and I think both of us did okay. This opponent was rated very similar to my rating, and we got here, I think this pawn blocking this bishop from coming back is a good invitation for me to play queen to b3, which I didn't know about until just a couple of months ago, really, when I was doing analysis. And a lot of times I noticed that once the bishop guarding that pawn has moved out, and then once it's blocked from coming back, this is almost always a good move. Not always, but very often. And so that's what I played here. And now looking back, the engine says, that's definitely a good move. I guess because it forces black to do something about that pawn, whether to move that pawn forward, which is one option, whether to play queen to here or here to protect it. Some people here even play queen to b6, offering a queen trade. And I think sometimes that's good to trade there, and sometimes it's not, and I still don't know. But in this instance, my opponent just moved their queen over, defending that pawn. So now I'm not sure what my queen's doing over here. But it's relatively safe for the moment, and of course, always has the ability to drop back. Once you get your queen over there, I think you're definitely supposed to keep open this escape hatch. I moved my rook over, which is often a great move in these positions. I guess it wasn't bad here, thinking that if I ever do take here, my rook will be operating on a semi-open file. I know that sometimes that's a good move and sometimes it's not. I'm still learning to tell the difference. Mainly, you don't want to go here while their bishop is pointing at that square. I think somebody made a song called Rook B1 about that exact thing, when the bishop is pointing at that square. But anyway, that's not counted as a bad move. Can you not see the evaluation bar? There, now you can see the evaluation bar. Okay. I don't know that was... I think that was a mistake on my opponent's part, but I wasn't sure how to punish it, what to do about it. As I said, when I moved my rook over here, I was planning on capturing here, leaving my rook on this file. It also, because my rook is here, means that the opponent would probably not be able to capture with their c-pawn, because that would leave their queen very vulnerable to any knight move, with the rook pointing right at the queen. But that, okay, I mean, the engine says that was my best move. And again, they shouldn't take back here, but my opponent did. And that turned out to be a blunder. I wasn't sure really how to punish it, because I know that if I move my knight right now, their queen can just get out of the way. And so I was thinking, if I put my knight here, it threatens the queen, but then the queen just moves. Like I could move here, or really not sure. Also, moving my knight there, of course, would block in my light squared bishop, which is still undeveloped. I don't want to start really attacking unless I can attack and develop at the same time. That's one thing that I've definitely been learning. Also, I almost moved the knight, but you know what? This rook's not defended. If I move the knight right now to anywhere, the queen just takes my rook. Probably. Yeah. So I realized that just while I was evaluating this position. So maybe my idea of moving this here was a little premature. But anyway, my opponent taking with the c-pawn was not a great idea. The only way the rook would be defended is if I moved my knight here, and as I said, that blocks the light squared bishop. So I thought, could I develop the light squared bishop and attack? Well, since they've moved this c-pawn, there's nothing blocking this diagonal anymore, so I can check. with this light squared bishop and to get it out at the same time. So I did that, and that turned out to be my best move. Let's show the engine here. And now my opponent can block with this knight, which they did. That turns out to be their only move that's not a further blunder. Now that the light squared bishop's out, I thought I can move this knight. Whoops, wow. I can move this knight back here and threaten their queen. Pardon me. And wait, why didn't I do that? I did that instead? I can't explain that move, because here in hindsight I was thinking that was obvious. And as the engine shows, it shows that neither one of those is that bad. This, in fact, is even better. I guess the idea was that I still hadn't developed all my pieces yet, and I'm trying to remember to develop before attacking. But it turns out to not be that bad. The queen did get out of the coming attack from the rook. This defends the rook too, so I guess that's a good idea. And here, I'm never going to see what Stockfish says is the best move. I say never. I might see that someday, but it says to just take that pawn. What would that do? They would take back, right? And then I would get the pawn. They would probably check me at that point. And I would have to move my king out of the way. See, that's one of those lines that I think Stockfish sees, and it knows the end because it knows what the best move for the opponent is and then what your best follow-up would be. And if I ever made that move, I'm going to call it a blunder, because to me it looks like I'm giving away a knight for 2 pawns. But that's what Stockfish's top line there says. I did the second best move, which still gives me a +3 advantage. My opponent played their best move, which is preparing to castle. I played one of my next best moves, which, threatens this bishop. If they don't move it, I can damage their pawn structure. And they did move it, which was their best move. And again, Stockfish wants me to take that pawn. I could understand that if their queen was still here. If their queen was still on c8, that would make a ton of sense, because I wouldn't be sacrificing a knight. And here, I don't know what I would be sacrificing that knight for. Also says queen to a4. What does that do? They're about to castle. Oh. If they castle, then I would just win the knight. Okay. That prevents them from castling. Okay, I just learned something. I just realized that lots of times in these evaluations it says, oh, put your queen on a4 here, and I have no idea why. But I just realized right now they have 2 pieces defending that knight. And so I wouldn't attack it because they would take back and then it would just be even trades. But it prevents them from castling, I guess. Maybe that's the idea. I still have no idea what that's all about. Bishop to a4. Not sure about that either. Oh, they've quit defending that b pawn. So this would reenact my attack on the b pawn, perhaps. Maybe that's what bishop to a4 means. Well, I didn't see any of that. I saw an option to put my bishop here, and I thought that might bait them into moving this pawn, which would weaken the area around their king, and then I could put my bishop somewhere else at that point. I wasn't sure about maybe pulling it back. But anyway, you know what? Maybe the idea here is that my bishop is almost trapped, and that removes this. Maybe that was the idea of knight to d5. I don't know. But I put my bishop there, and that turns out to take away most of my advantage, which happened a few times in this game. But again, the only way I could have maintained that huge computer advantage was taking that pawn, which I do not understand at all. I'm sure if I did that, I would end up being at a disadvantage for the rest of the game. As it happens here, now that they've castled, I'm supposed to trade off my light squared bishop for this knight. No, that's what I did. I'm supposed to put this bishop back where it was. Oh my goodness. Well, I did that. That gives my opponent an advantage. I did play one of my better moves here, and That was a mistake too. What was I supposed to do? E4? I was supposed to play E4 here. I guess because they only have 2 attackers on that square and I have 2 defenders. Also, my bishop looks like it might be about to get trapped again. And if I play this, this gives my bishop an out. Maybe that's what that's about. In addition to breaking open the center, now that I have my rooks on mostly or near the center. But I didn't play e4. I brought the knight back. I really can't explain that move. And they put their rook there. Again, I'm supposed to play e4. Oh, that's why I brought the knight back, so I could put it over here. But you know what the problem with that move is? The problem with that move is I've trapped my bishop. I just saw that, and they're supposed to play f6 here. My opponent did not play f6. They took my rook. I took back. Really, there's no choice there. And they're supposed to put their knight back here, but instead... Oh, they did put their knight back there. Okay. And now I can take this bishop, which was one of the whole reason I put my knight up there, I guess. So I did that. Now, here, I think they're supposed to take toward the center, but it's not that much difference for them to take the other way. And it got pretty complex here. I brought this knight back. They took my bishop, which I think was one of their better moves, and I took back, obviously. Now it wants them to go here. Is that what they played? Yeah. My opponent played well most of the time, and I think I did too most of the time. It was a fairly long game. Was that not... F3? What? F3. Okay, well, I mean, I get G3, but then I really try not to move these pawns. If I go here, yes, it forces the bishop to go somewhere, but then I've got these empty spots here that I can't defend. Or it's very difficult to defend, I think. The computer says, yeah, one of these two. I don't know what F3 would do. What would F3 do? I have no idea. I have no idea what F3 would do. Well, I went there because I thought, like, that pawn was sitting there weak and now it can be defended. Also, it gives something... It takes away something that bishop could have attacked. That bishop can't attack that anymore because it's gone. But it says that we're basically equal here. My opponent's best move was to bring that bishop back and reroute it around this way, which, I mean, they did to their credit. I think here is probably a great square. It would be defended by this pawn and pointing directly at my king. So, you know, good for them for finding that. I'm supposed to come across here now? No. Where did I see that? Oh, that's what I did. I came across here, which I think my idea was that to maybe stop this. What was I thinking? I think I was thinking that they were going to bring this bishop here and bring the rook over. I wanted to be able to defend my rook from d2. So that's why I brought my queen over and came down. But it says I should have gone there instead. I guess to blockade that pawn. That makes sense. Also, it would have blocked the bishop because their bishop is supposedly coming around here. That would have blocked the bishop. If they had taken it, it would have undoubled my pawns and blockaded that one. I understand that. But I think my plan, even though it says it was inaccurate or a mistake, whichever, I think that was fine because the idea was that they're probably going to bring their rook over here. I knew this pawn was undefended. If they bring the bishop here, now I'm defending this pawn with this queen move. And again, I was thinking about going to d2 to defend both of these pieces. Probably not a good idea to try to defend 2 pieces with the queen. But anyway, at least I had a plan. My opponent went ahead with their plan, which was to point their bishop at my king. I'm supposed to play g3 here. No, well, it's changing. Knight to d4 again. I played g3, which is one of my better moves and a move it said I should have played earlier. I have a nice little pawn chain now. And My opponent did what I thought they were going to do. It's not listed among their best moves, but I had been thinking they were going to bring their rook over, and they did. And so I went ahead with my plan to put my queen here. But the computer says I should just take it. And they'll take back. And then I'll put my king here, adding an extra defender to that pawn, I guess. And getting it off the back rank so the queen can't come down here for it. Well, I went ahead with my plan of putting my queen here, which defends both of these pieces, and even if it has to take one, it will still be defending the other one. Whichever one it takes, it's still pointing at the other one. So I thought that can't be bad. And it turns out it's not bad, but I don't have an advantage now. My opponent took, I took back, and now they're supposed to... Again, I'm reading what they actually did. I'm looking at the wrong list. That's what they did. What they're supposed to do is start moving these pawns or bringing their king, because the computer knows we're entering an endgame. I have a hard time thinking of it as an endgame with the queen still on the board and this many pawns, but I guess at this point, most of the pieces are gone. I have to learn to think of this as an endgame. Okay. Well, that's what they did, which gives me an advantage if I move my king here. And I see that. My knight is protecting my queen. But if I trade queens or allow my queen to be traded here, this pawn is undefended, and again that bishop is pointed right through here. So for example, if I just made a random move like a3, and they capture my queen, trading them off with my knight here, then they will take this pawn with check and win my knight. Whoops, and win my knight. I should have been able to see that. Why didn't I see that? I blundered. Because they can still take the pawn with check and win my queen. If they take my queen now, I can then defend the pawn. So here I made this mistake, and my opponent didn't capitalize on it. They should have. They instead, I guess, were too nervous to leave the queen on the board and start moving other pieces. But this was definitely best for them to get rid of the pawn. My king couldn't have attacked it in any way. I would have had to have moved out of check. I assume I would have moved here. Then they would have taken my queen and given them more support for their center pawn. But they took my queen back first, which sent us back to nearly equal. And then I saw that the pawn was undefended, so I moved up there. But I see that now, that at this point I should have done this first. That makes a lot more sense. Okay, but I didn't. We did this. I moved up. They moved that pawn. That's a mistake. Well, I'm not sure exactly why that's a mistake. I think my idea was maybe to come around through here because I'm defending that square and I get out in front. I'm able to attack these pieces from behind. I'm also able to defend against pawn advances, perhaps. Now we're definitely in an end game. That was an empty threat on the bishop, but I knew that it didn't have too many places to go. It did go to the best square. And I'm supposed to start bringing my king now this way. I don't know if I want to go that way and run into a square I can't go to. And probably pretty soon I'm not going to be able to go to that square because of this pawn move here. Which is why I went this way, even though Stockfish doesn't like that much. Around here, I thought I might be able to win this. Or, I mean, I thought I could at least draw it. I was very, very certain that I could at least draw this. But I was pretty sure I could win it. Because I've played so many of these pawn endgames before. And this is my thinking, is that this knight's not in any danger at all. Their piece can't see any of the light squares. It can only see dark squares. That square is completely off limits to that bishop. So my knight's completely safe, and they don't have a pawn on the b file to attack this knight. So that's one thing that I knew right here. I also knew they really don't want to move this pawn. At least I didn't think they wanted to move this pawn, because I would take it. I know they would take back, but then I can blockade that pawn with my king right there. And also, that's a dark squared bishop. It can't guard this promotion square down here, was another thing that I thought. I also thought even though the engine says this is one of their better moves, c4, I thought that's not really going to get them anywhere. They can't advance with that pawn because I'll stop it. I guess one problem with that idea is that if they do it, then this bishop is pointing at my e-pawn again, and so that kind of traps my king to being close to the e-pawn, because we definitely don't want the bishop to be able to take that, because then it comes back here and starts eating all these. Maybe that's why that's good, is because it re-enables that attack. But again, I wasn't that worried about that, because I know that pawn can't go very far, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to move this one, because again, that would undouble my pawns. I thought I was doing pretty good here. If the bishop moves anywhere else, I mean, I'm getting this pawn. So anyway, they played their best move, which was to bring their king, but it can't go much further this way. It's going to have to go a long way around over here. I'm supposed to go this way again. That's what the engine says. Again, I'm not seeing that. Where am I going to go from there? I can't get in this side. Right? I mean, that pawn defends these two squares. I can't get in from there. I can't get in this way. I don't know about all that. Well, I played here to prevent the c4 move that I thought might be coming. I thought if they played that, I could just go ahead and do this. If they captured back, I'm going to have, the knight move to be able to take it. They continued bringing their king. Brought my knight back to help, just in case, again, if they did this, I would now have another defender on that square, so I could get both the pawns at once. They continued bringing their king the long way around. I decided to bring my king. That turned out to be a little bit of an inaccuracy, but I'm not sure why. They brought their king further. They've discovered a path through here, I guess, looking to help shepherd this pawn down, maybe. And here I'm supposed to play h4, but I didn't see that. Instead, I played a4, thinking I can keep the king out. Of course, I can't keep the king out. It can just come this way, right? But they played that, I guess, to keep me from pushing one further. And I had no idea what to do here. It says I should play e4, and they wouldn't take. Well, of course they wouldn't take, because I would take back. I guess I didn't think of that, because I didn't, where's that pawn gonna go? No, the reason I didn't play that is because I thought they would push this one forward. And it would be harder for me to stop it with all that support. I decided to play a waiting game. I didn't know, now that they've put their bishop here, their king can't get in. And I thought, this pawn's defended. If it does come here, then where's it going to go after that? Maybe come after my knight this way? I don't know. I thought maybe I could come over here and defend the pawn and the knight with my king. Or maybe that's why the bishop's going here, to keep me from doing that. Okay. I don't know. It's pretty complex. But again, neither one of us were playing. Oh, the bishop did go there. And here I started getting worried. I can't see the evaluation during the game. I realized I'm not going to be able to stop this from coming around. Again, I'm supposed to play e4 or king to c2 to protect both of those pieces. Well, I did that. And the reason I did that was I know this bishop can't touch these two pawns, but it can touch my knight. My knight couldn't run away because my king was there. But I got my king out of the way so that my knight can go here and run away. That was my idea. But that gives my opponent a little bit of an advantage. They played their best move, which was to go after the knight. I did what I had intended, which was to go here. Engine says, oh, it's changing its mind. It can't decide between d1 and d3. Well, I could. I wanted to be closer to attacking these squares. Also, if I put my knight here, I'm protecting maybe a pawn push. Not right now because they have 2 attackers on that square. But if I did this and they pushed this forward, oh no, I would have lost my knight then. Oh, never mind. But again, right around here, I started losing confidence that I was going to even draw. And I realized that now, because of my weird placement of my knight, maybe the king can come in and start chipping away at these, and then they've got an outside passed pawn that I won't be able to get to, or I'll have a hard time getting to it. And they played their best move here, which was to split both of those. I basically have to take it, but then they take back, so I have to move my knight. I did pick the best square. I figured if I went here or here, the bishop would just take it, or here, or here. So my choices are limited to these 2 squares. And f2, I think, is too far removed from this passed pawn. So I went down here thinking I can at least stop it right there, either getting in front of it or capturing it once it gets to that square. The problem is that my knight is now on a square that the bishop can attack. And the king decided to start coming around that way, but that turns out to be a mistake. Why is that a mistake? I mean, I think I know what their plan was. Maybe to come through this way? Or come through here and take this pawn? Why is that such a mistake? Because I can go to f3? What does that do? It says I would go to f3 with my knight. They would go king to a5, and then I would move my king here. Stopping... Oh, it wants me to blockade that pawn with my king, I guess. Well, I wanted to blockade the pawn with the knight, which apparently was the wrong plan, because that gives the advantage back to my opponent. But I do know that right here, the bishop cannot dislodge that knight. Only the king can dislodge that knight. My opponent went back here. Not sure what their plan was. Well, I mean, I had attacked their bishop. They had to move somewhere, right? They were just getting their bishop out of danger at that point. But now their pawn is not going anywhere. But maybe that pawn will. And it's my turn. I played the best move, came toward this pawn. Because, hey, I thought I could just go ahead and get it now maybe, right? Well, they put their king over there, which is a huge mistake. I have an advantage, but I don't realize it yet. And right here, again, my confidence is low because I thought, whether they check me or take this pawn, I'm going to take this pawn. But then they've got that one. And this dark squared bishop can definitely guard this promotion square. So I wasn't sure. But their king's going to have to get out of there, right? That's another problem too, because the king's in front of this pawn. If their king takes this pawn and I take this pawn, when is their king exactly going to get out from in front of their own pawn if my king is right across from it? That was another thought that I had. Their king's not going to be able to come down any further because my knight's there. Their king's not going to be able to come out to one of these squares because my king is there. So it wasn't their best move, but they took that pawn. Now look at this. Again, here my confidence started to go back up a little bit because I have the opposition. Their king cannot get off the side and it can't come down. And it's stuck in front of their pawn. I thought, and their bishop's hanging. So they have to move their bishop first. And they did, which was the best place they could move it to. I guess that prevents me playing with the h-pawn. And it guards this square. But their king can't get out. The computer wants me to play g5. Or knight to d4 would have been better. What would that have done? That would have let the king come down. Look at that. It says if I played knight to d4, they would put their bishop here? I don't think they would. I mean, maybe they would. I have no idea. I thought they would use that opportunity to get their king from out in front of that pawn. Because right now their king's stuck in front of the pawn. But maybe they were seeing it entirely differently. I don't know. I played the second best move, which was to block the bishop from coming this way. Because otherwise the bishop could have come down here and come around. Maybe. I don't know, but I blocked the bishop's path. Also, I figured if they attack here, I attack here, preventing them from having... I lock up this side, basically. They made an even further mistake, locking their king in here. Their king is in jail, and that pawn cannot advance. I'm supposed to play e4 now. I have no idea what that would have done. But I played h4 to give further support to that pawn. Now here, I started to think maybe I can win. I didn't know I had an advantage, but I thought I can definitely draw this, and I think I can win. Because I don't think they can advance their a pawn. Okay, well, they played their h-pawn, which is their best move, and I decided to leave this here, even though Stockfish says it's okay for me to take it. I decided if they take, I take back, and this side is locked. And I might be able, eventually, not right now because those squares are cut off from me, but I might be able to eventually get my king over here and chip away at these pawns. And I've got a mass of pawns here ready to go as soon as there's room for them. But yeah, Stockfish says I can go ahead and take this, but of course they would take back, and that would undouble their pawns. So I don't know about all that. Well, here I made a mistake. I should have played here. I guess with the idea of going there. I had to make a move. That's the problem with that. I had to make a move. Now the problem with that is that it lets their king move. I didn't want to move any of those pawns, and I really didn't have a good place to move my king. I wanted to move there and come back. But then I realized I left a spot for their king, and now if I come back, it's check, yes, but then they directly attack my knight, and where's it going to go? I don't know. So now my opponent has an advantage. But I also thought, I can sacrifice this knight for that pawn, and I think I can still draw. So I went there, which turns out to be an even huger blunder, because they can push that pawn. But again, I had already decided to sacrifice my knight for the pawn. So now, it says to play d2. Well, I decided to play d4. With the idea that I could come here, and when that pawn moves forward, I would sacrifice my knight for the pawn right there. That's what I played. It turns out to be really bad. And now my opponent is supposed to attack over here or move their king down. What did they play? They moved their king. They moved their king out of the way of the pawn, which they're supposed to do. I went with my plan to sacrifice my knight for the pawn because I thought I could still draw if that happened, because they can't beat me over here on the king side. And I thought I had enough pawns, and once that, because I figured this bishop, whatever it does, it's going to have a long way to come around to get this. And by then my king could be over here eating at these. So it moved the pawn forward, and it turns out to be my best move to sacrifice there. But my opponent apparently can still win here. I just didn't realize it. I thought now that I can draw this. They took with their king. Wait. It says that's bad? They're supposed to take here now or take that with their bishop, because that gives their bishop a head start to coming around here, I guess. But they took with their king, which lost most of their advantage. I started marching. I couldn't go forward this way. I'm going to have to go the long way around, a really long way around, but I think I can get there. I started calculating, well, like the bishop can't go here right now because of where my king is. It can go here, but then it's going to have a much longer way around to get to the base of my pawn chain, or pawn web, whatever that is. And if it goes there, I started calculating, it's going to come here. I'm going to be next to this pawn already. If it takes that one, I'm going to take this one. And I've got a passed pawn that I can easily get out of the way of and start advancing. So I thought, I ought to be able to draw this. Also, they can't guard that promotion square. Yes, I was already looking at all of this at this point. Again, had no idea I was down at this point. But only if they take there. They didn't take there. They moved their king. I guess not realizing they could have come around this way. Or thinking that this bishop would somehow protect these pawns. How's that bishop going to protect this pawn? So my opponent made a couple of critical errors here, and here's another one. Obviously, they're going for this pawn, but I'm going to get there faster. I got there. They have to move the bishop now, right? Well, they did move the bishop, aiming at this pawn, but now, no, I get this one. I have a passed pawn. I don't realize they can force a draw here. They need to come here with their king, it says. I would have played the same move as my opponent here, probably. They took with their bishop. I don't understand what the huge difference is here. They need to play king to d2 or d3 to maintain a drawn position. Is that because the bishop still cuts off these squares? Because at some point I'm going to have to advance my pawn through that square. But if they did this, that's pretty slow, because I'm going to move my king. And then they're going to take this. I assume that's what that's what the computer says. That's what we would have done. I mean, that's what I would have done if they had kept moving their king. And so yeah, if they move here, I move here. They're going to take this pawn. I'm going to take that pawn, and then both of the ones in front of it are fair game. And then they're going to take this, and then I can move this one forward. Well, then they have to go there aiming for the back one. Okay, then I take this one. If they take that, I can take this, and I've got two passed pawns. I added all this up on the board, so I don't know how it's still a draw if they do that. But they didn't do that. They did this, which, again, that's probably what I would have done if I were them, because it looks like this is a much faster route to chopping off those pawns. But I pre-moved that. I started pre-moving some of these moves because I didn't look like I had a choice in some of them. Well, of course, they're going to capture on f4 here, and now I have to move this, right? So I move it. Now that bishop can't even see it. Their best hope is to take here now, which that makes sense. But they didn't. They went to keep this pawn from advancing, which I should have advanced it anyway here, but I didn't. It says I should have advanced it anyway, and they wouldn't have taken. Well, they probably would have. I think if I had advanced here, surely they would have captured, and then I would have taken back, and their king would have been too slow to stop me. So anyway, just a lot of counting of moves, and who can get where first is what made the difference here. They can't get there, so now I have two passed pawns. The computer counted that as a great move for some reason. The idea is, obviously, I have to keep protecting this pawn, and I also have to get out from being directly in front of it. If I move here, or here, or here, or whatever, the opponent can force a draw. This is the only move that doesn't turn it into a draw again. Obviously, I can't move there. But yeah, if I go here, they take this pawn. And then I can't ever move the other one, because they're guarding the square in front of it. And they could force a draw. But now that I've got their last pawn, they can't win. The best they can do is draw. And I thought, I've got this. So I went there, which later turns out to be my only good move, and now it doesn't matter what they do. They can take this pawn. I'm going to get their bishop, and that one's gone. I was a little worried about that. I thought they might be able to draw here if they took this pawn, and I took back. And they would, then they could get next to my pawn, but it wouldn't matter. Their king couldn't catch it. Okay. But instead they brought their king now. But then I advanced that pawn. Both of these are protected by my king, and they're both on squares that bishop can't see. So the bishop had really no choice. What's it say I should do? Oh, it says I should just advance this pawn, let them take it, and then push the other one. Well, that's sneaky. I decided to just go between them, because now what's the bishop going to do? If it goes here, I take it. If it goes here, I take it. If it goes really far, I suppose if it went over there, I would push this pawn. And if it went over here somewhere, I would push this pawn. I had it in the bag. So anyway, they had to get out at that point, and then my opponent resigned. So I know that was a little bit of, long, and I almost want to do this video over because I feel like I messed up in several places, but I don't have that kind of time. I misread the situation a few times, especially with my knight and bishop down here in these areas. But I am pretty proud of the fact that I realized I could sacrifice my knight for that pawn and still at least draw. And after a few more moves, I was pretty confident I could win because I was calculating how long it would take them to chip away at my pawns from behind versus how long it would take my king to get around behind theirs. My mass of pawns was closer to their back rank, closer to promotion than their mass of pawns. We had about the same number of pawns down there, but they were down there. And I think that made all the difference. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for all the support on this channel, and we'll see you next time.